So Princess Anne helped William pull off something that had been 25 years in the making. And the fallout inside Windsor Castle was so immediate and so intense that Camilla was reportedly left completely gobsmacked, running straight to Charles, demanding he fix it, only to realize she had absolutely no power to stop it. That is the story we're breaking down today. Because when you actually look at what was said versus what happened, the timeline reveals a wound that never healed and a plan that was executed with surgical precision. Before we get into the details, make sure to subscribe to Crown Watch so you don't miss updates on stories like this. What just happened inside Windsor Castle is the moment royal commentators have been waiting 25 years to talk about. William has done it. Fueled by years of silent rage, he pulled Princess Diana's official portrait out of the dark storage room it had been shamefully buried in and placed it exactly where it belongs, right beside Queen Elizabeth on the Hall of Matriarchs wall. Camilla had no idea it was coming. When she saw it, she was completely gobsmacked. She ran straight to Charles and ordered him to have it removed immediately. What Charles did next turned the entire palace upside down. The wound that never healed. There is a portrait of Princess Diana that most people have never seen up close, and the story of where that painting has been sitting for the last 25 years will make your stomach drop. The portrait was painted during one of the most celebrated periods of Diana's public life. She was at the height of everything, her beauty, her warmth, the way she made ordinary people feel seen and loved in a way no royal had ever managed before. People who were present when Diana first saw the finished portrait say she stood in front of it for a long time, without speaking. The way you go quiet when something captures exactly who you are. That portrait was supposed to hang in the Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor Castle. This is the most sacred ceremonial space in the entire royal residence, a wall reserved exclusively for the most important women in the history of the British monarchy. Diana never saw it hung there. She died before it happened. And after she died, the portrait was quietly removed from consideration, wrapped up, and placed in palace storage where it sat in the dark for over 2 decades. When Diana died in August 1997, the world grieved openly and loudly. Inside the palace, something else was happening. Something quieter and far uglier. Within hours of Diana's death being confirmed, the first calls made from inside the palace were not calls of grief. Royal insiders report that among the very first concerns raised was whether Diana had any crown jewellery in her possession in Paris. The scramble to reclaim property began before the British public had even been told their princess was gone. And while that was happening, Camilla was already moving. Camilla had spent years as the hidden woman, the one Charles visited in secret while married to Diana, the one Diana called the Rottweiler in private, because she understood exactly what this woman was doing to her marriage. Now Diana was gone, and Camilla began moving through the palace rooms Diana had called home. She did not simply move in. She erased. Diana had kept fresh flowers throughout the palace spaces she lived in, arrangements she had personally chosen. Camilla ordered them removed and burned. Not replaced, burned. The bedroom Diana had slept in, the room where she had held her boys and cried alone at night and written in private. Camilla ordered that room locked permanently. She did not want to sleep there, but she also made sure nobody else ever would. She wanted it sealed away, like something shameful. Diana's personal items were boxed and relocated. Her image began disappearing from the most prominent ceremonial spaces inside the royal residences, and the Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor, that sacred wall of honour, never received Diana's portrait at all. For over 20 years, the most beloved royal woman of the modern era was missing from her own family's wall because one woman found her presence uncomfortable. William was 15 years old when he walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London. He walked in silence, in a suit, in front of the entire world, with his face completely still. He was a child who already knew that his father had been having an affair with another woman for years. Diana had sat him down and told him herself. She said there were 3 people in their marriage. She said that was the reason the family had broken apart. His younger brother Harry found out differently. He was watching a television debate about the monarchy with Diana. When Camilla's name appeared on screen, he turned to his mother and asked who that was. Diana had to explain it to her youngest son in that moment. Live, with no preparation. But the most devastating thing William would ever learn about what was done to his mother came from a letter in 1995, 2 years before she died. Diana wrote a note to her solicitor, Lord Mishcon. In that note, she stated that she believed Charles was planning to have her killed in a staged car accident, brake failure and serious head injury, so that he would be free to move on. She wrote that her husband was planning an accident in her car. She wrote that Camilla was nothing but a decoy and that she was being used by the man in every sense of the word. 2 years after writing those words, Diana died in a car crash in a Paris tunnel. That note was handed to police after her death, but sat untouched for 6 years before finally reaching Scotland Yard. Charles was eventually questioned about it privately at St. James's Palace. William and Harry did not know the full contents of that letter for years. When William finally understood what his mother had written in the last 2 years of her life, and then looked at what had been done to her memory inside the palace walls after her death, something inside him hardened completely. It never softened again. He watched Camilla move through the rooms his mother had lived in. He watched her remove portraits of his mother from the rooms. He watched the hall of matriarchs stand empty where Diana should have been. He kept his face completely still in public, but the anger was eating him alive on the inside. At 16, he finally broke. He pulled aside a close confidant and let it all out. He said that Camilla got her claws into his father and never let go for a single instant. He said that was the reason his mother was dead, because Diana had been driven out of her own family, stripped of her protection, pushed out until she had nobody around her, and she ended up completely alone and unprotected in a Paris tunnel in the middle of the night. A 16-year-old boy said those words about the woman now living in his mother's home, and he carried every single one of them for the next 25 years. There was one other person in this family carrying a wound connected to Camilla that ran even deeper than William's, and it started long before Diana ever entered the picture. That person was Princess Anne. Before Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles, Andrew Parker Bowles was in a serious romantic relationship with Anne. They were close enough that marriage was being discussed. The royal family shut it down because Andrew was Catholic, and Anne, as a senior member of the Church of England, was not permitted to marry him. She stepped aside. She had no choice. And within a very short time, Camilla moved in, and Andrew proposed to her. Anne sat in the pews at their wedding in 1973 and watched it happen. The woman who took the man Anne was supposed to marry then spent the next several decades as a secret mistress who destroyed her brother's marriage, broke Diana into pieces, and eventually walked into Buckingham Palace wearing a crown. Royal author Penny Junor reported that Camilla was deeply intimidated by Anne for years, that Anne's cold behavior toward her was extremely nerve-wracking, that issues from their shared past had never once been resolved and never would be. After the 2023 coronation, Anne reportedly confronted Camilla at a private luncheon, looked her in the eye, and told her directly, "You are not the Queen. You are just the King's wife." Anne has allegedly never bowed to Camilla. She reportedly asked Queen Elizabeth personally for permission to be exempt from that protocol, and the Queen granted it. Anne watched Diana be erased. She watched the portrait disappear. She watched the Hall of Matriarchs' walls stay empty for 20 years, and she carried every single piece of it. Both Anne and William wanted one thing: to take Diana to where she belonged, the Hall of Matriarchs. Then came the night when the waiting was finally over. William had spent years preparing this move. Careful meetings with curators about portrait placement protocol. He studied the historical records on every previous portrait placement, going back decades. He made sure every single institutional rule was followed perfectly, so that once the restoration happened, nobody on earth could legally challenge it or reverse it. He had been playing a 20-year chess game inside his own family, and this was his final move. The night before it happened, William called Anne. The call was short. Both of them had been waiting a very long time for this moment, and they both knew it. "I cannot wait to see the look on her face. It is long overdue." "Diana deserves to come home," Anne said. "She comes home tomorrow," William responded. That was it. The call ended. Camilla had no idea it had happened. She had no idea what was coming for her. In the morning, she had spent 25 years believing she had won. She was about to find out how wrong she was. The night Diana came home, William's team had scheduled Camilla for an engagement outside London that day. It was a deliberate move to get her out of the building and keep her away until it was done, and completely irreversible. While she was gone, the Hall of Matriarchs at Windsor was closed to all but a handful of trusted staff, people who had been personally vetted, people who understood what they were about to be part of. Nothing appeared on the official royal diary. No press release was prepared. This was happening in total silence. In the early evening hours, the portrait of Princess Diana was carried into the Hall of Matriarchs. It had been sitting in protective wrapping in palace storage for over 20 years. The staff who handled it that evening moved carefully with it, the way you move with something that has been hurt and deserves to be treated gently. Princess Anne was there personally. She had insisted on overseeing the placement herself. She was not going to let someone else do this. She had waited too long for this moment. The protective wrapping came off slowly, and for the first time in more than 2 decades, Diana's portrait was fully visible inside the walls of Windsor Castle, in the room where it had always belonged. The frame was prepared, the placement was measured and confirmed, and within 90 minutes of the portrait arriving in that gallery, Diana's face was on the wall. She was placed directly beside the late Queen Elizabeth. 2 women side by side, one who reigned for 70 years, one who never had the chance to reign at all, right where they should have been together from the beginning. The room was very quiet after it was done. Multiple witnesses reported that nobody spoke for a moment. They just stood there and looked at it. And then Princess Anne, who had walked into that room carrying 50 years of grief and fury and deeply personal history, said something quietly, almost to herself. Staff members nearby heard it clearly. "She belongs here. She always did." Just the truth, spoken out loud in a room that had been silent about it for 25 years. Diana had been the most beloved royal of her entire generation. She had filled stadiums and lined streets and made the whole world weep at her funeral in a way that had never happened before and has not happened since. And yet her own family had kept her portrait locked in a storage room for over 2 decades, because one woman found her presence threatening. That woman was sleeping across London that night. She had no idea what had just happened. She had no idea that the portrait was on the wall. There is something that needs to be understood about how terrified Camilla had always been of this moment. When Camilla finally met William for the first time face-to-face at Clarence House, royal biographer Christopher Anderson reported that she was shaking. She needed a vodka to steady herself before she walked into the room. She was physically trembling at the thought of facing a teenage boy. Critics believe it's because she knew exactly what she had done to his mother. She knew he knew, and she had no defense to offer him. She had been afraid of William since he was 16 years old. but she had never once imagined he would do this. That the boy who walked silently behind his mother's coffin had spent the next 25 years quietly and methodically building toward a single evening where he would bring his mother back to the wall she was always owed. That evening, Camilla returned from her engagement outside London. She went to sleep in the palace she had spent 25 years reshaping and restructuring and scrubbing of another woman's presence. She slept, and in the hall of matriarchs, Diana looked out from beside the Queen. The next morning, Camilla would wake up and walk straight into the worst day she had experienced in decades. She just did not know it yet. Camilla returned to Windsor the next morning, expecting a completely normal day. She walked in, heard the news, and the reaction that followed was immediate and physical. She did not compose herself. She did not process it quietly. She went completely rigid with fury. She ordered the portrait be taken down at once. She demanded an emergency meeting with William. She insisted that Charles step in on her behalf. She demanded a full explanation from every member of palace staff who had been involved in carrying out the restoration. Every single one of those demands was refused. Every single one. For the first time in her entire royal career, Camilla was completely powerless inside her own home. The woman who had spent 25 years quietly restructuring the palace around herself had just discovered that the palace could be restructured right back, and she had zero authority to stop it. But the refused demands were not the worst part of that morning. The worst part was what happened when she turned to her husband. Charles had spent decades fighting for Camilla. He had battled the institution, the public, the press, and his own sons to make space for this woman inside the royal family. He had spent 25 years being the one person in the world Camilla could always rely on to stand up for her. And now she stood in front of him, humiliated and furious, waiting for him to fix it. He looked at her, and he said nothing. He let his son's decisions stand. He let his sister's actions go completely unchallenged. He did not make a single call. He did not raise a single objection. He sat there and let Diana's portrait remain on that wall. Palace insiders say that in that single moment, Camilla understood something she had never been forced to face before, that Charles had made his choice. He had chosen the institution. He had chosen his son. He had chosen to finally honor the woman he had spent a lifetime wronging. What makes Charles's silence even more devastating is the full weight of what it actually means. This is a man who, according to reports, begged William in private not to push Camilla out after he dies. A man who knows better than anyone how deep William's resentment runs, and has spent years trying to hold it in place. Sources close to the family have confirmed that William still harbors real and unresolved anger toward